All right, good morning. It's a pleasure to have you here with the Oral History Committee. My name is Jessie Resurrection. I'm a junior. I major in marketing management and I minor in business law and business management. Would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, Jesse, thank you so much for asking me to do this, and it's a pleasure to do it with you. I am a professor of psychology in St. Peter's University since the year 1978.
Wow.
I am, I guess, the longest serving Latina professor at the university. I have my Ph.D. in psychology from Temple University in Philadelphia. And I then did my post PhD with Albert Ellis in New York City. He was the founder of the cognitive psychotherapy, and my professional association with him lasted for over 30 years. I'm licensed. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in New York and in New Jersey. Okay, I have 8 books. I have about 30 plus uh, uh, peer-reviewed journal articles. In fact, several of them I've had some Peter students as co-authors. You are in the honors program, yes?
Yes, I am.
Yes, I was the first advisor for the first honors thesis, and we did a cross-cultural study that was later on presented at an international congress at the World Congress of Cognitive Behavioral Psychology by the student and me. And it was in Granada, in Spain. And later on, it was published. Let's see, what else can I tell you? I speak 5 languages, and I guess that's part of the fact that my field of expertise is cross-cultural psychology. So I guess that's it in a nutshell.
This is wonderful, Professor. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a few questions for the committee. Are you ready?
Oh, yes, yes.
Thank you. Would you please describe your childhood, your family, and where you grew up before you came to St. Peter's?
Okay. I was born in Philadelphia. Okay. I left the United States when I was 1 month old. Mm-hmm. My parents, the families of both of my parents, the one on my mother's side came from Spain. The one on my father's side came from Lebanon, but both families migrated to Colombia. And that's where my parents met and got married. And then as newlyweds, my father was a medical doctor. He was already a surgeon. And he wanted to do a second residency in gastroenterology. So he applied to do so with Dr. Bocuse, who was the, let's say, major figure in the development of the field of gastrointestinal diseases. And Dr. Bocuse worked at the Graduate Hospital in Philadelphia. So they went to Philadelphia and stayed there for a couple of years. And in those couple of years, I was born. And then they made the decision of going back to Colombia. They both wanted to go back. And they did so. My father founded 2 medical schools. My mother was part of the group, was a co-founder of the Museum of Modern Art.
Wow.
This was in Cali, in Colombia. In the family, there's been let's say, a history of service. My grandmother founded the Colombian Women Voluntary Service for the Red Cross. Yeah. And I guess that climate of service sort of had an influence in me. And since I was 14 years old, living in Colombia, I started doing voluntary work in extreme poverty areas around the city with precisely a Jesuit father, Padre Jaramillo, okay, who was the head of a group at the school, the Jesuit school, called Congregación Mariana. And years of work with him resulted eventually in, becoming an official member of Congregación Mariana. And I think I was the first woman in 400 years that got that honor. So
wow,
that was
that's
really
incredible.
yes, that was really nice. So I guess that's it in a nutshell.
Sounds great. So, what brought you to St. Peter's University or college?
Yeah, it was. It's an interesting story in a way because I studied my PhD at Temple University in Philadelphia, but I was writing my dissertation and living in Europe. I lived for a couple of years in England and in France. And then when it was time to defend the dissertation, I came back to Philadelphia to Temple University, got the diploma, and got a job offer to teach at Montclair State University here in New Jersey. So I decided to stay in the States. And then while I was there was a newspaper article from the American Psychological Association, the Monitor, that had an announcement from St. Peter's College seeking 2 openings for 2 psychology professors at St. Peter's. Yeah. So coincidentally, a friend of mine was a graduate from the psychology department at St. Peter's University and was doing the master's at Montclair. And I mentioned this, and he called his former advisor, who was the chair of the psychology department, and then I got an interview. And I came to school. I walked in. I met everyone, and on the spot, without warning, I was asked to give a 30-minute class. So I chose cross-cultural psychology. I chose my dissertation. That had been comparison of 360 children from Colombia and from the United States, kindergarten, first and second grade, in the attainment of conservation, according to Piaget, and how family structures, Colombia being a collectivistic society, the United States being an individualistic society, had an effect on something that, was really cognitive. And that was the topic. And within 2 hours, I was offered the position.
Oh, that's incredible.
And I accepted.
That's good.
And I accepted because it was very interesting. Right from the moment when I walked in, I really felt at home. And this home really has been the case for over 40 years. In fact, this fall, I'm going to be around for 43 years at the university. Yeah. So what made it feel like home? I think part of it was the presence of the Jesuit education in a small school. It reminded me of the years that I had spent at home and the different things that I had developed, in conjunction with these programs that I mentioned before. So here I am. Let's see. I think it's important. Let's see. Let me say something because I think it's important.
Of course, go on.
Thank you. Let me give you a bit of a historical perspective of what the environment was like. And I would like to address it from 2 different points. One is the environment at large, the society at large. all right? And the other one, the environment at St. Peter's University. And again, we're talking almost 40 years ago. At large, the underlying belief was that women were not equal. That, in fact, society in general, many people in the society thought that jobs should not be given to women because we were having them just as something to do before we would get married and start having babies, and that we were really taking those jobs away from men who were very serious people. And then I say this with a bit of humor, okay?
Of
But also, interestingly enough, I was, and don't quote me in the exact number, but I think that at the time, and we're talking around mid-70s, for every dollar that a man earned, in an exact position with the exact credentials, a woman would make 60 cents. That number, I've been told, has somewhat changed, not completely, but it is now, I think, around 75 or 80 cents an hour for every dollar. All right. In fact, I was hired at a lower salary. That male counterpart who had exactly my same credentials and my same training, but again, that was the nature of the beast. We can say that. And then when it came in regard to the environment at St. Peter's College, it was, a large number of the faculty then and of the students were white males. And many of them came from Irish families, Italian families, and only 10% of the faculty were women, all right? And I think that it was interesting because there were two types of attitudes within the school, all right? One was the attitude of, let's say, the traditional civilian people. And that was the attitude that on, let's say, several occasions was not easy to deal with. I was a female. I was in my 20s, and I had an accent. So these civilians, these things that maybe now sound a little strange, but they did things like they gave me nicknames, and they had predatory attitudes that, at the time everybody thought was very funny. All right, that was one of the environments at school. But the other one, and this started early, and I think it's important that we bring it up, was the contrast that the attitude of the Jesuits had. All right, they were supportive, they were respectful, and they were very, very different from the values of the society at large. And early on then, I think this fostered the development of, this environment within, the St. Peter's University, this environment based upon, the philosophy of the Jesuit education and the inclusion of all men and women for others.
I agree with you entirely. St. Peter's fosters such a great environment for diversity and also inclusion for many people of different ethnicities. And you can find so many clubs here that support all our histories, all our stories, and what we can do going forward for social justice.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, one thing I actually want to ask as a follow-up question is, do you think that the gap between the genders of how men and women are treated in the workplace, do you think it has changed to a positive direction? Do you think there's any changes that need to be done?
Yes, yes, yes. In fact, let me address that from probably the impact that the Jesuits have had in this. All right. I think that one of the reasons why I stayed at St. Peter's University, because of the several environments that I'm describing, was the attitude based upon the philosophy of the Jesuits regarding education. And there were really two major reasons. One was that Father Glenn, who was the president of the university, started at the same time as I did, appointed me very early in the career to be a member of a team that was in charge of middle state evaluations. In fact, he appointed me 2 times, all right? And another reason in that environment was that I really made solid, long-lasting friendships with members of the Society of Jesus. Initially, this has been a person that has had incredible influence in my life, with Father Oscar Magnon. Okay, I'll talk about him a little later. And later on, as the years went by, with Mark De Stefano and with Claudio Urgaleta, Jesuit members of the Jesuit communities, who really were there for me in several occasions where I had difficulties in my life. And they also had, let's say, a profound impact. At the time, there were 40 Jesuits at school. So this respect and appreciation for females, although the numbers were not there at the beginning, I think has provided with an environment where changes along those lines take place. I think that the impact of the Jesuits really had in my life, and that's the only perspective I can give you for this, because I don't want to go into the statistics, and I want to try to reflect what it has been like. Part was familiarity with the early experiences that I had with them, but also another component was beyond let's say, the Jersey City University campus, and through the generosity of Father Oscar Magnon, during 20 years, every single summer, I had the honor of going with him to Rome.
Wow, that's incredible.
And then, among the things that I was able, to get access to, were, let's say, he introduced me to someone who was another Jesuit, who was the minister in charge of an organization of the biblical branch of the Gregorian University in Rome. And with him, both of them took me to visit the private gardens of the Pope at the Vatican.
Oh.
Women were not supposed to go there, but they took me. Another incredible experience was Father Magnon took me to visit the private room in Rome of San Ignatius of Loyola. He's the founder of the Jesuit order. And we walk in, and he just explained to the people that were in charge that questa è la professoressa Lega. This is the Professor Lega at the University of Jesuits in New Jersey. So I ended up being able to visit that, which was also, a private setting. And then when it comes to elements like cura personalis, I remember that in one of the summers, it was my birthday, and then Father Magnon and another Jesuit priest, Father Mayer, who was in Rome but was being transferred to work in Lebanon, organized for my birthday a little mass. It was the three of us around a little table in Arabic and in Italian, and it was a private mass given at the Jesuit residency in Rome. It was the San Roberto dell'Armeno is the place. And it was in honor of the memory of my Lebanese grandfather, yeah, whom had migrated to Colombia when he was a teenager, and I never met because by the time I was born, he was no longer with us. Okay, so you see, it's a big part of my life. And how has that affected the component of the social justice? I think that when we take a look at the environment that the Jesuit education provided, okay, it was an environment that ended up attracting people with similar values. And I think that has been a part of those who have joined and remained at the university for all these years. And many are there. I'm going to just mention one or two, But among the professors, somebody who came a few years later, but I think also has been not a Jesuit, in fact, he's a Jewish person, okay, has been David Surrey. He's a professor at St. Peter's, and he did things like organize Thanksgiving dinners for foreign students at St. Peter's University.
That's beautiful.
It was wonderful. Him and his wife, I joined them several times. I had that honor. And there were times where they were, close to 80 people in their house. Yeah. And another person that, sort of stands there, not part of the faculty, but of an employee, was Bill Knapp. Bill Knapp, who was the person that for several decades was in charge of the audiovisual services at the university. And had it not been for him, I don't think many of us would have been able to, to accomplish a lot of the things that we did. So another point in regard to women that I think is very important, historically speaking, from my perspective, was that as the environment was difficult, challenging, let's say, although I hate the word challenging because it masks a lot of other stuff. Okay. It was difficult, okay. There were two women among that 10% of females at St. Peter's University in 1978 that were incredibly supportive to me. One of them was Eileen Poyani. Dr. Eileen Poyani was part of the math department, but she has also been the assistant to several of the presidents at St. Peter's College and then University, and has had major impact in helping not only me, but the path for many women. And the other person was a woman, Dr. Josefina Castan, from Catalonia, Spain, who was part of the Modern Languages Department, but was also held the job, was given the job of Dean of Women when in the mid-60s, St. Peter's College went from an all-male school to co-ed, and then women joined, the student population for the first time. And she was very instrumental in helping with a lot of these changes. She was female, like Eileen, and she was also Hispanic. So it is. I wanted to, to mention these two people. I don't know if I've answered that question.
You've actually done more, which is incredible. Thank you.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, that was good.
So then, you mentioned at some point about perhaps looking at larger issues, seeing how, is there anything along those lines?
Oh yes, actually.
What would you want me to comment on?
Okay. So the question I had prepared was, what were the larger societal issues that happened during the time while you were in St. Peter's College, and how did it affect that community along with yourself?
Okay. All right. I think that okay, let's begin. It's important to again stress the context of the Jesuit value and the Jesuit education as part of the frame of reference in which we had to deal with major issues. I think that the central philosophy has been, again, respect for the multinational nature of the community, all right? The cura personalis and, changes that we have observed where, let's say, from what it used to be largely white males, now the student population includes people from over 60 countries or even more, I think. And also what used to be a very minimum percentage of women is now close to, I think, 50% of the student body are female. Yeah, and these things happen, let's say, if we look at the external events on what was probably a major traumatic event for a lot of people in the country, which was the World Trade Center. And I remember, we had been at St. Peter's for several years. The environment was there, the classes were there. I remember walking in for the first time in a classroom after the towers fell a few days later. And it was a classroom that had, sitting next to each other, people who were Jewish, a girl who was Arab and was wearing the traditional costume, and individuals from many, many different communities. And the level of respect and care was there. The other thing that I think has been important, and by the way, let me give you a little side issue. I have maintained contact with the students that I call my firstborns. When I came to St. Peter's, that first generation, a year later, it was people like Alexandra Scalzi and Barbara Lisa Johnson and Patrick Moore graduated. And several of them have ended up having PhDs in psychology themselves. And in fact, one of them, Patrick Moore, has been part of coordinating programs between Jersey City Community College and St. Peter's, the psychology department. But what has been important in this context at large? I think central to the changes that need to take place, we hope can take place um, from the perspective of social justice, humanness, really, you know, is the concept of empowerment. I think it is a concept that can be taken in different ways, but probably the one that I can offer that I have found to be helpful and positive is empowerment of self uh, in acknowledging that we don't control the environment, no matter how hard we try, okay? But we do very much control how we view it. And I remember the words of the very famous Eleanor Roosevelt, who once said, um, nobody can put you down without your consent. So I think that that's very important to acknowledge. And parallel to that is I have the choice then of empowering other people. If I give my sense of my sense of well-being, my desire to accomplish things in the hands of others. And then I'm not gonna say that being criticized is not unpleasant. It is hard, yeah. But it doesn't have to go beyond that uncomfortable moment. We have the power not to then place that variable in someone else. And then for a long, long time after incidents are over, we maintain them alive. Why? We are making those decisions.
That's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are types of things that you know, that I've sort of wanted to talk a little bit about, you know. Um, I think also that if we look at history and we look at the history of the Jesuits, you know, for a few centuries when they were going abroad to different regions of the world, um, they always had as part of their philosophy stress in the education of local people worldwide. And you see them early, centuries ago, founding schools, eventually founding universities. And that's, I believe, a major contributing factor in the trying to um, help or assist and, you know, given opportunities to a wide range of individuals. Yeah.
That's great, Professor. And finally, I would like to ask you, why do you think going to St. Peter's University for higher education is very important?
I think is I think is part of, you know, in writing we look at the importance of the academic programs and the contributions, and I think that's basic, all right, and incredibly powerful. But I also think is that non-tangible component of the wanting to be um, there for self, for other people, the attitude of inclusion, of others as people, not regarding particular traits in their way of being or defining themselves, that, it is important, not just for the higher learning of our area, but in higher learning worldwide. Okay? I don't know if that answers the question.
That does. It's a very good answer. And
Yeah.
going forward, excuse me, going forward, I actually have additional questions that pertain specifically for your experience. I would like to know, as a Latina professor who had such a legacy in St. Peter's University, what message would you like to give to all the Latino and Latinas who attend our university, who are starting there, who are possibly even first generation going to St. Peter's University with the experience you had?
Okay. I think I would like to give it in particular to Latino women and men, but also in general for the reason that I was mentioning before, to students from different backgrounds who probably end up being the first generation in their family that ever had access to education, to formal education, and I mean to university degrees. I think that that having the degree is very important, but I think that also having the degree and carrying the responsibility that it has, and how much it enriches your own personal experience when you make it a function of not just yourself, but the people that you have around. Yeah. And the other, which I think is also very important, is sometimes, and it's a very human trait, we have a tendency to feel victimized. And I think that in no way I'm taking any importance in the accountability that circumstances should have when individuals are attacked based upon their gender, their creed, their, families, their culture. But as with the empowerment, it is important not to assume a role. So don't let it become part of you as something that makes you less. Yes, people have to be accountable, circumstances have to be accountable, but that doesn't make you as a human, as a whole person, inferior in any way. All right? In fact, you can use it to build emotional muscle. And we women have done a lot of that. And we minorities have done a lot of that. Give it a turn. Use it to build emotional muscle, to build skills, to develop, the motivation, the long-term attainment of goals, as opposed to stay within the immediacy of the situation and not seeing further away. Develop the ability to put up with discomfort, because life is going to be very uncomfortable on many times. But if you see far, as opposed to a myopic way of looking at reality, that discomfort passes. And in fact, you put your energy in acknowledging you have it, acknowledging you feel it, but also not give it more of your own strength, but put the strength in the resolution, if possible, of what is creating these difficulties with the long-term goal. And if some of those cannot be resolved, then accept. Accept. Don't let that tie you down, work as a weight, on your neck. You choose. You choose. Yeah.
I agree with you entirely. Your message could be applied in so many contexts, and I appreciate it because I'm actually the daughter of immigrants and I'm a first generation here studying. And considering things with social issues and how you apply your message for empowerment, I believe it can help me a lot, along with many others, even during quarantine, who are questioning many things going forward.
But my dear, you make me proud. People like you are really the validation of why I stayed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad to be a part of that. It's really, it's wonderful, really, if I think about it.
Yes. It's wonderful, and thank you so much for doing this with me.
You're welcome. I was happy to be here. I was really curious to know definitely all the voices in St. Peter's University, and I think I know so much more now, and I definitely appreciate it much more beyond the level that I perceive as a student, not just the issues that we see and how we confronted it, but also how our teachers and even past generations have been carrying the same message.
Yeah, and we're in this together, darling.
Yes.
We share the world, whether we want it or not. We share the world.
Yes.
So we better learn to develop ways of living in it in, the best possible way. Yeah?
I agree. Embracing diversity is incredible, and also approaching change with empowerment would always bring us to a more successful outcome.
Well, my dear, I am here if you guys need me for anything. I love teaching. It's been wonderful. And part of it is like what we just happened, seeing that others are growing. It's not me growing, it's all of us growing. So thank you. Thank you, dear. And count on anything you need, okay?
I appreciate that. That's wonderful.
Okay, my dear. So shall we then end the interview?
I wouldn't mind, but would you have any more concluding words?
No, I think we've pretty much covered things, and then just leave it open for anything that in any way I could help with, right?
That's a great message. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you, my dear.
We'll conclude our interview. Take care.
Bye-bye, darling. Bye. Bye.